Hi all, welcome to round 9 coverage of the FIDE World Chess Championship 2024. So Gukesh is with the white pieces in this game against Ding Liren. So we have d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and now g3. This is the Catalan opening. Okay, and if knight c3 had been played, bishop b4 is the Nimzo Indian. Now knight f3 is actually technically just anti-Nimzo Indian at the moment. It's when b6 is played it becomes queen's Indian. You can see that the queen's bishop fianchetto there. d5 is still kind of anti-Nimzo Indian territory. Bishop b4 check here, an immediate bishop b4 check is the Bogo Indian, named after Bogolojbol, who was a very, very strong player. He actually, in some tournaments, came ahead of Alekhine. He had some brilliant tournaments. So, Bogolojbol, a very interesting player, a world championship player as well with Alekhine in more than one world championship. So that's the name Bogo Indian. If bishop d2, bishop e7 is the amazingly subtle retreat variation, where the idea of this check is to kind of disrupt d4 control, sometimes try and let the bishop occupy c3 instead of the knight. It's got some subtle points, the Bogo Indian retreat variation. Okay, so we have g3, we're still in Catalan territory. Check, bishop d2 and bishop e7. You can see we've got a component of the Bogo Indian retreat variation here, but it's still Catalan territory at the moment. Bishop g2 and now d5. And now here with knight f3, we've actually literally now transposed into the Bogo Indian retreat variation. e3 would maintain the status as Catalan territory, and even if we played knight f3 here, it would still be Catalan territory. But yeah, this position, we've got a match now, transpositional match. It's in the Bogo Indian retreat variation. Okay, so we have both sides castling. c6, we have queen c2. Okay, so black's position is very solid. Knight bd7. You might be concerned though about this bishop on c8. Is this a point of interest? We have rook d1 and now b6. So that is the problem bishop which is trying to be solved now with b6. The bishop may go to b7 or sometimes, pardon me, can go to a6 sometimes. We have bishop c3. The bishop here actually goes to b7 on this occasion. There is a potential pitfall. If black is too greedy, d takes is actually a mistake. What do you think white plays here, which is quite punishing for the black position? Yeah, knight e5, because c6 is pretty vulnerable. If knight takes e5, d takes, we're hitting the knight, we're hitting the queen. Knight d5 runs into e4, and we end up winning material. So that would be a mistake, d takes e4, because of knight e5. If bishop b7 here, we can take on c6, and we do have an advantage here with the bishop here. And after the bishop retreats, we may be, playing for e4 and d5 later. Okay, c5 as an option seems a little bit not in line with previous moves of black. It seems to be a bit loosening. D takes, B takes, C takes, knight takes. If we look at this position, white should be able to claim a small edge here. It looks pretty unpleasant compared to the game continuation. If E takes, again, we get a small edge with white with E4, D4, E5. This position is a small edge for white. So this is pretty solid, bishop B7. Not too many weaknesses introduced. We have knight BD2. So when I say a solid move, yeah, it kind of minimizes the potential for any deep pitfalls, deep holes in the road. This bishop B7, it's very solid. So knight BD2, if white plays C takes, in fact here, either C takes, this seems absolutely safest, would be just equal. E takes is also pretty safe as well. even though it creates an imbalance in the pawn structure. Yeah, but why does black need to create an imbalance in the pawn structure? Keeping it more symmetrical is also preferred from an engine perspective. Black doesn't need to make it that interesting. If black can hold a draw, yeah, it's good to hold a draw with black in a World Championship match. So c takes is pretty pointless because of c takes, basically. So knight bd2, we have queen c7. If d takes c4 here, it's just helping white. Knight takes c4, bishop d2, it's just help white get a small edge, with bishop f4 looking okay. e4 not so good, c5 is possible, and knight d5 even position. So queen c7, we have rook ac1, rook fd8. c5 here isn't totally terrible. As example, c takes, knight takes, d takes, b takes should be an even position. So rook fd8, we have b4, which seems to want to discourage c5, but c5 is played anyway, rebellious. b takes, queen b2. Okay, we have knight b6 now, which seems to invite a relative pin. So the thing is with relative pins, they're not. If it's not to the king, it's not an absolute pin. White needs to be continually concerned with knight takes c4 because it's a relative pin. It's a legal move. Knight takes c4 needs to be a concern for white calculating from this point. We have d takes c4. Knight takes c4 here. White just takes, you know, with advantage. It's not a good idea. So we have d takes c4, knight takes c4. Now, in this position, we have an interesting move. Bishop takes f3. If knight takes c4 here, bishop takes c7 would be a mistake because of knight takes b2, bishop takes, rook takes, and black has a big advantage. Black's just one material here with options of bishop takes if rook b1. Black's just one material. So what white would need to do in the event of knight takes c4 is to play what? Yeah, rook takes c4. Relying on b7 hanging here, queen takes b7. The resulting position should go to equality, for example, like this. Just goes to equality. Okay, so yeah, that's, yeah, knight takes c4, there's rook takes c4. Okay, so bishop takes f3 is played. We have bishop takes b6. Bishop takes f3 would also be a mistake here because of knight takes c4, rebelling against the relative pin. Also, just a bit of trivia for you. When Fischer made his astronomical increases in rating, it seems he was becoming more tactical and often would, in his games, rebel against relative pins. These are something which maybe amateur players, they kind of underestimate, that we're not really pinning. And here it's kind of backfiring on us, this pin. Bishop takes c7, knight takes b2. Black's getting a big advantage. Here it would be a backfire with black having a big advantage. So yes, bishop takes f3 would be a big mistake. So this is where bishop takes b6, yeah, is needed. And there's also another line. Bishop takes f3, knight takes c4, bishop takes. If rook takes c4 here, queen takes a5, backfiring against the pinner. And this is in black's favour to have bishop and knight against the rook. It's in black's favour. So bishop takes b6, a takes. We have bishop takes f3, rook a6. Funny enough, yeah, this seems safe and sound and cozy, protecting b6. But even rook a7 is possible. Knight takes rook a6. Even this is possible. because this, if we take this position, it should just be even, actually. It's going into equality, even if white's pawn up here. But rook a6 is played, because, you know, opposite coloured bishops are starting to come in. We see that there's opposite coloured bishops in the position. So queen b5 is an inaccuracy. If there's any point in the game white might have been able to get a small edge with the absolute latest engines, latest stockfish, knight e5 might be a way to get a small advantage for white. Might be, it seems, at least from an engine perspective. It looks to be poking into that c6 square. If black plays knight d5, interrupting the bishop, we can play e4, and I know we've blocked in our own bishop. Bishop e2 has an idea to poke into c6 again with bishop b5 support. And even if knight takes e4, then we're forking the rooks. This position, rook b1, we've forked the rooks. The exchange up, and it looks as though, well, maybe black's getting the exchange back. But then there's knight takes e6, and here a4, and even if we lose the exchange back, and opposite colour bishops, we have a small edge in theory. It's not much. We actually do have a small edge in theory, it seems. If knight takes d1 wasn't played, if e5 we do get a small edge here, check h4, and it should be a small edge for white overall. It does seem it's not a big deal to write home about knight e5 though. Bishop d6, we poke into knight c6, queen b3, d takes b, and then bishop takes c5, knight d4. It's a small edge, shielding the rook on a8 with knight d5. Small edge for white. So maybe you could say knight e5 was a moment to try for a bit more. Okay, but queen b5 is played. We have now rook takes a2, so swapping a2 for b6. And you'll note here it's not just opposite coloured bishops, but actually it's like the left-hand side pawns for both sides have been removed, and it would leave just a symmetrical kind of pawn structure if these four guys are against four and opposite coloured bishops. And during the live stream, a lot of the engine lines all becoming zero, dramatically zero. It's like every single move was soon becoming zero. It's funny. So queen b1, rook b8. Okay, so rook b8, let's go with that. D takes c5, and it looks as though, hold on, white's got this extra pawn. Not for too long. Rook a6. Yeah, the pawn can't really be held. Rook a5, queen b4. There's a way of black playing this as well here with h5 to give the king some air. Not rook takes c5, which would be a disaster because of the back row. In this case, rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and there's going to be a back row disaster. Okay, but with the move h5, there's no way of holding on in this configuration with the knight on b6, the pawn on c5. So that pawn is being eliminated, and it just leads to an even position. And if queen d4, rook takes c5, just leads to an even position. Okay, so yeah, rook a5 does do the trick with h5. Rook a6 though is played. Queen b5. If queen b4, actually here we can just take on c5. Black can just take on c5. This is just even. By queen b5 we have bishop takes c5 here. Queen takes. If rook takes c5, rook a takes b6, queen c4, g6 to give the king some air. Even position. So queen takes c5, queen takes b6, queen takes b6, rook a takes b6, rook c6, rook takes c6, bishop takes c6, and we have a kind of even endgame position. King g2, rook b2. Black has a lot of, well, not I say a lot. Black has piece activity. h5. It doesn't seem to matter if the pawns are pushed there. They're not really exploitable weaknesses. Pawns going backwards is not such an issue here. It's not that easy to exploit these pawns. So the rook attacks the bishop moves to b5, the rook attacks the bishop again, bishop d3, knight d7, we have f4. trying to stop knight e5, it seems. If rook a4, it's not such a big deal, knight e5. The bishop can go to a6. It's an even position. So f4, we have g takes, g takes. You'll notice white's got these, an isolated pawn on h3. It's not such a big deal at all to have an isolated pawn on h3. King e3, you might think, oh, the number of isolated pawns has gone from 2 to 3. It's not such a big deal in this simplified position. It's not that easy to exploit. Rook g1 check is another alternative, and here white, could go with f5 here, and this position is going to be drawish. For example, here, this is just drawish, so this is just drawish check, and then it's going to be like a repetition soon. But there's no need to indulge that kind of thing. Just king f3, rook d2, rook a3. Why go a pawn down when you don't need to? Rook b3, f6, rook a3, king f5, rook a5 check, king e5, f takes, rook takes d3 check, king e2, rook takes h3, e takes. Okay, it is a pawn down, but it's just a rook pawn. This is a very clear draw now, just because it's a rook pawn. And yeah, absolutely a drawn position now. Okay, so interest points. Well, as a course creator, I'd like to ask you a question. If you're doing a course and you want to talk about the very exciting, by contrast, Nimzo engine, do you think it's justified just to cover bishop b4, just to cover rather knight c3? Do you think you could do a course on the Nimzo engine and just cover knight c3 without covering the kind of what's been labelled in some sources as the anti-Nimzo engine, which can, or the Catalan? Would you need to cover knight f3 and g3 if you were doing a course called, the Nimzo engine defense? That's my from a course perspective. I just have that question for you. I'm just interested. So anyway, here we do have Catalan territory. Okay, and yeah, it was a really solid approach from Black indeed. I think kind of very, very solid play, non-controversial from both sides. Pretty non-controversial, leading to a kind of record number of 0 evaluations when watching this live. So if there was an interest point for this game, it was that there were so many zeros around the place. It seemed any move was going to 0. I mean, in many situations later. Okay, I hope there were some interesting points in there. If you want to check out my World Championship playlist, Kingscrusher TV /WC capitals WC 2024. There were some super exciting games in earlier rounds, I assure you, to check out. If you want to check out my chess courses, kingscrusher.tv. There's still discounts. It's got discount links, coupon codes in that page. I've got over 40 chess courses now. And yeah, I might do a course at some point about the Nimzo engine, which is so well respected. Or at least trying to play the Nimzo engine defense. Okay. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Leave any comments at all. Yeah, hi would do. How you found this game? Who do you think is going to win the match? Now, will it go to tiebreaks? Will Ding Liren be the favourite in the tiebreak situations at faster time controls? Okay, thanks very much.